Microphone check 1 2. Microphone check 1 2. So we are live and we should be good to go here. Give everybody an opportunity to show up. What's up, Scorpio? Scorpio, I wish I could stay for this one, but I can't have a good live. Yeah, this is going to be just a very kind of chill. It's going to be more of a hangout with the chat, question, Q&A. We're going to kind of spend time catching up on things. Have you guys been keeping up with the information that's been kind of breaking with the case as far as the depositions? Elvis Fields, Johnny Messer, Patrick Westfall, Brad Holder. If you guys have those documents, send them to me. Right now, I've just been watching Criminality. Also, I think Salty is covering it right now, actually. But I think she's on the tail end. Okay. So one of the things that I picked up specifically with the reading of Elvis Fields was Baldwin's I don't know, I feel like he tries to be very manipulative. Seems like he's trying to manipulate Elvis Fields. Take advantage of his low IQ. Right? It's like he uses it to kind of mold the narrative. Like, "Oh, you're stupid, good. I can use that." So, that really reminded me of what Justin Woodhouse told me with his, he had an interaction with Baldwin and his brother Brandon. You guys all know Brandon Woodhouse and his connection to the Delphi murders of Abby and Libby, who this is all about, right? The murder of two young girls, how they were targeted, the victimology. We don't even know the true criminology at this point. But Justin told me that Baldwin tried to manipulate his brother Brandon, tried to get him to lie. And these are guys that were taken in through the ringer as far as Carroll County and local law enforcement there in Indiana. They hated these guys, Brandon and Justin. Justin wants to come on the channel. I'm reaching out to him right now, so hope maybe we'll finally be able to kind of connect here. So I've reached out to him to see if he wanted to come on. So Justin is the brother of Brandon. But in the meantime, he did kind of write me a very detailed message, just in case for whatever reason we weren't able to connect. So maybe we'll go to that today. Good to see you, Robert. Sees through. Some baffling info in those exhibits. Yeah, what is that? Where does it come from? Where do those depositions come from? Is that just part of the discovery and the defense kind of released it to certain YouTubers or certain people? Oh man, this is long. Whew. Okay, there it is. Maybe I can put it on full screen. Let's see if I can do that. Oops. It doesn't look like it's going to let me. How's that look, guys? Can you see that somewhat? Sorry, I don't use Facebook that often. At least Messenger. Okay, so he gave me the gist and he provided a lot of information, so we can go through that. She Warrior, what's up? Of course Baldwin would do that because he is a big D. I mean, I got that vibe. Is that the same vibe you guys were getting from it? It's like it was obvious that he wasn't understanding what was going on, right? He would say something like, all right, I'm going to give you a list of names. You let me know if you recognize any of them. He says, yes. Or something, something strange like, yeah, I recognize that name. And the dude's like, Baldwin's like, well, I haven't given you any names. So he's like, he's not paying attention. He doesn't even, he's kind of just repeating. It's very leading. Especially when it comes to time. When you're asking somebody with who's lacking basic comprehension skills, they're unable to grasp time. Look at Jesse Miskelly. Like he was able to give a detailed description of what happened, but when it came to the time, he had no grasp on it. He didn't understand the concept of time. So Baldwin was kind of leading him. He's like, all right, I'm showing you 2 photos. And he's like, yeah, that's mine. Look, he's copying me. So when he's like, okay, so at some point in the past, or 2016, 2017, he was copying you. Well, at this point, Elvis is thinking, well, obviously, yeah, look, you just showed me the photos. So he's being led. And instead of addressing that, Luttrell attempts to address it for the sake of the record, but he fails miserably. And Baldwin's just like, oh, whatever, I'm going to continue with this. I'm going to keep taking advantage of him. We need to mold him. We need to bend him. We need it to fit because he knows most likely nothing's ever going to stick. But if they can kind of create some kind of a issue or controversy, it'd be very beneficial for them. Joni, what's up? Okay, so let's look at some of the stuff Justin had to say about what happened to him in Carroll County. Barb, go to my community page, and I posted a link from Criminality. They're doing a pretty good job of going over the information. There's a lot of new stuff there, a lot of new names, a lot of information. And honestly, I think it's doing more justice to the pro Richard Allen as guilty folks, because it's kind of showing how Elvis Fields doesn't really make a good witness. And Brad Holder almost likes to play cat and mouse. Like even though he knows he's innocent, he wants to kind of put out there like he might be guilty. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's hard to explain what's going on with him. So he's a very interesting person. Like, he's one of those guys, if you can put him on the trails or if you could break his alibi, like, game is on, right? But why waste your time if you can't do those things? Why waste your time like leaping over the nexus, right? Leaping over the nexus, and I'm also going to try to leap over the alibi too. And then I'm going to try to sell him as a I don't know, viable suspect. Like, I don't know how you package that. You know, it's like this beautiful package, right? It's got all this Odinism and Norse paganism. But when you turn it around, there's like a warning label. Warning, no nexus, has an alibi. It's like, oh shit, well, that's not what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? Then you pick up the Richard Allen action figure. It's like right on the front of the box. Comes with a nexus and physical evidence. No alibi included. It's like, bam, that's the one I want right there. So I don't know how you package Brad Holder. It's all about the sticks with him, right? His infatuation with nature and finding runes, and then Baldwin and Rosie's attempt at taking the Delphi crime scene and attaching it to Norse paganism. So you have to subscribe to that premise first off, right? That's the foundation of Richard Allen is innocent. You have to subscribe to the fact that those sticks left at the crime scene and placed on top of Abby and Libby were not placed to hide them from view or to camouflage them, but they were part of a ritual, and that the sticks were placed in a certain way that represented runes. So you have to first accept that as a truth. Once you accept that as a truth, then you can begin to see that Richard Allen is innocent. So that's where my road splits right there from most people. I look at the runes, then you compare them to the sticks. I don't see it. And then you put yourself in that position, right, of the killer standing at the crime scene, and it's just obvious that the person is trying to conceal these I don't know if it's the people on the bridge or if it's the guy in the van, right? I don't know if he's trying to conceal Abby and Libby from those folks, but it appears to be all of the above. That's why you have these long sticks. You have the girls behind a very, like, basically the biggest tree out there that you can find. Right? Concealment. He's not trying to cover them. He's kind of standing there looking, and he's like, okay, yeah, it's hard to see them. And it probably was from his vantage point. So if you were standing near the creek, or maybe cutting through through Ron Logan's property, walking towards the cemetery or to Ron Logan's property, or near the crime scene, your view would be obstructed. But if you were flying a drone from above, no, they're not covered. So people have to kind of do their best to understand that. Try to put yourself there, or even just put yourself in a wooded area, how easy it is to conceal somebody from your vision. You have all these trees, you have all these sticks, you have the ground's not level. You know, it's not like some flat parking lot. So that's what Richard Allen was doing. So in order to believe Richard Allen is innocent, you have to first subscribe to the fact that the sticks are first and foremost runes, and that the blood on the L tree was part of a ritual, and another rune left there as a signature by the killers. The defense even suggested that there was some bloodletting, which for me, this seems more like a satanic ritual, or like something you would hear in an Illuminati conspiracy. But there's no evidence of that other than the wounds, right? The wounds are very interesting. Brings you back to what Julian Powell said, right? In that TikTok video that he posted. He said, let me see if I can quote him. You insubordinate C word and little bitch. And I think he was talking about his wife actually at the time, now divorced and separated. Called her an insubordinate little C, little B. Don't you know that I will gut you like a pig? I'll slit your throat. I'll drink your fucking blood. That's a quote, a direct quote from a Twitter post from somebody that was on the trails that day with a loose affiliation with Kagan Klein and with the mental health industry, along with the Army, National Guard. This person was at a Logansport, could have somewhat have a connection, possibly with Richard Allen. So that's something to be investigated. There's two avenues of potential connection, not to mention location and his family members living in Peru, and his father dating Keegan Klein's neighbor, Callista Schatz. So the fact that he mentioned drinking blood, cutting somebody's throat and drinking blood was quite interesting. But I just don't know how you do that without, I don't know. I feel like you would have to be set up better. How do you not leave any evidence? Is that what all the clothes being wet and thrown in the water? What is that all about? Thank you. I've always wondered about Elvis. Yeah, Holder seems to like to play games like Damien Echols a little bit. Yeah, very similar. You're right about that, Barb. Same vibe. Like he knows he had nothing to do with it, but he wants people to think that he did, you know? I'm still surprised they didn't find the perpetrator's DNA at the scene. Yeah. To me, that shows one person with minimal physical involvement, right? The majority of the involvement was with a gun. Even though we don't have evidence, other than the bullet, we can assume that he had his gun there, right? He's not just running around with the bullet and accidentally leaving it at the crime scene. That's not, you can assume that if you want, but I believe that would be reckless of you. I don't recommend it. The bullet, I think it's safe to assume there is a gun, right? So if he's not physically controlling the girls, a headlock, wrapping around, grabbing their arm, or anything like that, even though there were some bruises on Abby that did kind of could represent somebody grabbing her by the arm, which is probably what happened after he killed Libby. So that's it. And then once that happened, then you got to worry about the elements crossing the creek. Maybe him taking his own measures to try to get rid of the DNA. But yeah, he really didn't have to touch them much. because I believe if he did touch Libby, it would have been around her wrist, and he could have been wearing gloves. So he dragged her by the wrist. That's why she ended up kind of in a weird position with one arm up. It's because what he did was he looked around and he said, oh shit, what do I do now? Grabbed Abby, told her to get dressed. He said, you get dressed. She says, well, I don't have my clothes. It's in the water. He said, well, put on Libby's clothes. She says, okay, puts it on, finds the phone. She's like, oh shit, the phone. Puts it in the shoe, puts her own shoes back on. That's probably the only thing she had in her arms, dropped everything else. Was still wearing her shirt, everything that she had on other than her jacket. Lost the jacket in the water. He tells her, put the clothes on. Let me figure this out. I don't know what happened. I snapped. Just stay calm. I'll let you go. She puts on the clothes, finds the phone, says, oh shit, hides it in the shoe, kind of clutches the shoe. He tells her, because he's going to kill her. So he tells her to sit behind the tree right where he plans to move Libby. He says, sit down right here. Sit down and don't move. And that's when he probably grabbed her arm and threatened her with the gun, right? Re-racked it to scare her. There's the bullet right there, right next to her, right on the ground. Tells her to sit down, and he's trying to hide her and position her behind the tree. This huge tree that's kind of blocking the view if you were standing on the private drive. He's like, okay, all right, she's blocked. Because he knows that he's going to kill her right there when he's done staging the crime scene. So she's sitting, and she has the phone. She's sitting Indian style, right? And she has the shoe between her legs, and she has the phone, and she's trying to access it. She's trying to get the phone activated. And this is when Richard Allen is moving Libby right now. Total disregard for her life. Just yanking on her arm, pulls her over near Abby behind the tree. And that's when he just turns around and without even a word, just cuts her like once or twice. She kind of sits there and kind of like it reminded me of what happened to that Ukrainian immigrant on the bus. Remember when that guy just kind of like slashed her and there wasn't really a whole lot of blood? You're just kind of like, what happened? Because they don't really show it. But you just see this woman, she's just kind of sitting there, right? And she's not really responding. She's just kind of in shock. Like, what the hell just happened to me? Like, did he just punch me in the neck? And it's like this slow reaction. That's probably what happened. And that's what the pathologist meant by she died slow. He did not attack her the way he attacked Libby. He did like a sneak attack, right? He moves Libby, hides her behind the tree, kind of goes back there and says, okay, I can't see them. He probably walked around to the other side of the large tree and looked and said, okay, they're both hidden behind the tree. He might even said, Abby, here, sit here. Then began covering Libby with the sticks and doing it again, walking around the big tree and kind of positioning himself as if he was looking from the bridge or from the creek or from the private drive. He's like, okay, I need these big ones. I need something to cover her entirely right here. So I'll bring the biggest one I can find, drags it over. And this entire time, Abby has probably got the shoe in between her legs and she's trying to access the phone. But something's wrong, right? She's rubbing mud into all the ports. She's it's not, something's wrong, right? It's not turning on. It might have like a little bit of water damage or it's safeguarding itself. And this is just all my theory. This is everything that I've gathered from covering the trial and all the evidence. This is the story that I've put together that the evidence tells me. And I believe that Richard Allen was looking, he kept checking, from this angle, that angle, And that's the reason we have the sticks. He used those sticks to block them. They are completely covered. If you're looking from the ground towards the girls through the trees, they are 100% covered. Not if you have a bird's eye view, because that's not what he did. That is the purpose of the sticks. And if you notice, there's a blood puddle underneath where Libby touched the tree. That's where he attacked her violently. He was angry. Right? You made me cross that creek. I already planned to kill you anyway, but now I'm mad. Right? He was looking for a reason to get mad. It made it easier for him. I think he struggled a little bit once he came to with Abby. That's why during his incarceration before trial, he said, "I'm sorry for what I did to Abby." Never even mentioned Libby. Right? He talked about crossing that bridge with his daughter. Libby looks a lot like his daughter. It makes you wonder. Why was he so comfortable? Why did he feel like he had so much privacy back there? Red Queen, I saw there were new documents dropped while I was doom scrolling Reddit last night. Trust the poster who has them. Yeah, if anybody has those documents, send them to me. We'll go over them. If he used a box cutter, we know the devastating impact it can have based on the North Carolina train attack. Well, during my warehouse days, that's all we use is a lot of box cutters. So I've had some pretty nasty wounds. Accidentally cutting my finger. But if you can cut through thick cardboard with a brand new razor blade that way, just imagine what it could do to like the soft tissue area of a body. What's up, Miss Dog Lover? Good to see you. Dark Side, what up? I think he probably talked to Abby as well while doing that. It might be the reason we see sympathy with her. Yeah, sit down. Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm sorry I did this. I snapped. I'm not well. Let me figure this out. Just give me a second. And that's probably when he racked the gun, right? When he was trying to control her. Grabbed her by the arm. We have bruising that we hear about during the trial. Bruising on the arm. That's him grabbing her, trying to assert his authority. Uses the gun, like, don't make me use this. Racks it. She's like, okay. Sits her down. That's why her legs are crossed. So when he slices her neck, I think he did it from behind like a sneak attack. He's like, I promise I'm not going to hurt you. And she just is kind of sitting there wearing a wet hoodie. And she's shaking. She probably has her arms crossed, fingers inside the hoodie. And she's hiding the phone underneath her leg. She's got the shoe and the phone underneath her. He's like, I'm not going to do anything, not going to do anything. And then boom, he just does it. And it wasn't as brutal as what he had done to Libby. So it took a little bit longer. I think very similar to what we saw, what happened to the Ukrainian immigrant that was attacked on the bus. I think exactly like that. That explains the shoe underneath her. It explains why her leg is bent, because she was sitting Indian style. And it also explains why there's not a whole lot of blood other than what was soaked in by the hoodie, which was wet, by the way, and would totally explain that. So I don't see anything like anything ritualistic from any of that. If Richard Allen's not sorry for what he did to Libby, that means that he was probably kind of blacked out, angry. And this also tells me that he took off his own clothes. maybe took off his jacket, took off his shoes, right? He was probably at the same stage as Abby. Forced Libby, and then when he started to force Abby to undress, he kept up with her, right? She never had a chance to take off the upper clothing other than her jacket. So she took off her jacket, she took off her pants, she took off her shoes and socks, according to what was said in the trial, because she had soot on the bottom of her feet that was consistent with the creek. So they know that scientifically she took off her shoes. So that's what she made it across the creek with, was just her shoes, one sock, and she dropped her jacket and her pants and underwear, went down the creek some a ways, and were found by searchers later on. So that to me, Richard Allen probably was taking his pants off, had his jacket off and his shoes off, and that's when Brad Weber comes down that private drive. And he's not paying attention, right? And there's kind of a cliff right there, anywhere between 15, 30 feet up, which would block the screaming. So if his window's up, music's on, girls are right next to a cliff face, and they're screaming, help, help, help. And Richard Allen panics. At that point, I believe they just took off. One of the girls probably said, most likely Libby, Abby, grab your clothes, let's go. Because they're familiar with that area. Everybody says, why would the killer cross the creek? The killer didn't cross the creek. That's part of the victimology. They're familiar with that area. They know that it's shallow there. Libby does. She's probably walked across that, rolling her pant legs up. She chose to go that way. That is in the direction of where her ride is. That is in the direction of 300 where she needs to go. She needs to get on that side of the creek, and she knows that's the best place to do it. Probably made it across with ease, but the fact that they found Abby's clothing in the water tells me that she struggled. She's not the athlete that Libby is. They both make it across. Richard Allen's putting his pants on, putting his shoes on, and just grabs his jacket. Finally catches up to Libby. Remember, we're talking about a military guy. Went through boot camp. We have him on video flopping around like a fish, jumping fucking 2 feet in the air. He's agile. He's an agile little SOB. So don't tell me he couldn't do this. Those were little kids. I don't care how athletic Libby was. I don't care what her weight was. Richard Allen was a grown-ass man with the ability to make it through boot camp and also get ranked in the military. Don't give me that shit. You can't have it both ways. You can't say he was an honorable military man, with strength and courage, and say that he's too much of a bitch to commit a double homicide of two little, I'm not going to call them little girls, but they're young teenage kids. They're like little kids. They're barely 13, 14. They're barely on the cusp of being teenagers. And they were little. Ghost, where do you get this info? All of this info is what I read, and the way that that's the way I process the information that was provided during the trial. That's my interpretation. It seems like a super weird. Why is it super weird? Your fucking name and avatar is super weird. How about that? I feel like you had to have Abby blindfolded. Maybe even went behind her, telling her he was going to fix the blindfold or something. Well, yeah, the evidence does speak to some kind of fabric. Remember, they didn't know if it was tape or what. But yeah, evidence is consistent with that, Cheeks. As far as the blindfold. Stephanie, what's up? Dark side, I agree 100%. And maybe he wasn't even going to kill them. But with the close call, if they tried to run or something at the same time, I can definitely see that. Yeah, it is interesting that you say that, Dark Side, because covering true crime for the last 4.5 years, I have come across a lot of cases where a predator will approach a group of two, will a pair of, a group of two or more young girls, even at school. There's been known predators who have walked onto school grounds while the kids were on recess and forced two of the kids, around the side of the building into a field. Proceeded to assault both of the young girls and did not kill them. Just left. But he was more of a traveler. He was kind of a vagrant, kind of like a handyman who would travel from town to town. And each town that he went to, he would do the same thing. He would kidnap two young kids, assault them, and not commit a murder. Would just brutally assault them and then let them go. So, I mean, it is possible that Richard Allen may have let them live if it wasn't for the van, but I seriously doubt it. I think he was going to kill them no matter what. He was going to have his way and commit a murder. He's always wanted to in this scenario, in my opinion. I'm going to grab a water. Hold on. All right, that's much better. Dark side, scared to death. Absolutely. I don't know if you guys have ever had like a near death experience, like a horrible car accident or some kind of injury or just like a close call or your life flashes before your eyes. Um, I'm absolutely sure that's what was going on. Just pure terror. And that's why I really have no sympathy for Richard Allen. If you really think about it in all seriousness and all the actual information, um, it really will just piss you off unless you're rooting for that. When you sit down and look at all the facts and take all the weirdness out of it, you have to really think about what Richard Allen did to those girls. He planned to rape them and kill them so that he can have some kind of control back in his own life. Total disregard for human life, his own family. We're talking self centered 100%. And afterward, he probably found a way to justify it. He definitely was a compartmentalized killer. That's the only way he was able to get away with it for so long. Somehow it was probably he blamed Kathy in his mind or his mother, probably his mom. Stephanie says he was in the military 10 years, right? And I think he was like a sergeant or something like that. Like he paid his dues. You can't have it both ways. You know what I mean? He can't be this hot shot military vet and then on these, in the same breath, he's unable to cross a little creek and kill two young teenage girls. Like, what are you trying to say here? That you're sticking up for that's your story? That's what's causing you to support a child killer who could slit the throat of two young teenage girls just so that he wouldn't get caught for it? You support that, huh? Yuck. Yucky. Now, if you got some really valuable, hardcore, hard-hitting information. You know, hey, I broke Brad Holder's alibi. Check this shit out. Then you have my attention. And then I could easily justify standing next to you saying, free Richard Allen. But to go down a dark path like that without a flashlight in my hand, you got to have ulterior motives. Dark side, yeah, he brung the gun. You're right. That explains the bullet, right? No DNA because he never got a chance to really sexually assault the girls. Therefore, he didn't really leave any DNA. I don't think he had a chance to do anything. The evidence tells me he forced Libby to undress. She did that. And then he said, now you. And he turned to Abby and said, you undress. So as she begins to undress, so does he. Now, my only question for you out there is why the hell is he so comfortable? And it sickens me when he tells me, when we read about him taking his daughter across that bridge. Is that why he's so comfortable? Has he done this before? I hate to say that. But how is he so comfortable that he has one girl completely disrobe, the other begins to, and he joins in? Like, hey, we're just going to all be completely undressed in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the day, just off of a very public trail. What has given him this confidence? Possibly he did it before. Perhaps. Miss Doglover, that's why they always say do not allow them to take you to a secondary location. Fight back and do not comply. Yes. Those are words to live by. Absolutely. And nobody should whatsoever, in my opinion. Brian Simonetti. Or he knows a search party is inevitable and he's buying himself time. I don't think that was his motivation. I think he was more motivated by fear, but I think he did benefit in that way, and I believe he would take joy in that later on. Right? Wow, I did that. That bought me an entire 23 hours or 20 whatever it was, 21 hours or something like that. He's like, yeah, that bought me plenty of time. So even though I don't believe that was his initial goal, I think that he did notice that it benefited him in that way, and that pleased him. Somehow taking credit for it as well, right? Yeah, I'm so smart. Good thing I decided to do that with the sticks. You know what I mean? I'm so brilliant. Dark side. I always think about how many people he probably talked to about the murders to locals working at CVS. Well, all of the people that knew Richard Allen that chose to come forward publicly and, make a statement, they all said that he talked about the case. He would talk about the family members, talk about the case, the murders, and how horrible it was. That's his compartmentalization. During those conversations, he's probably completely separated himself from the events and has even convinced himself that he wasn't involved. He has to buy into it during these conversations because it's kind of like self-preservation, something that just kicks in for these chameleons, in my opinion. Fishy, what up? I mean, JP alone makes me pause. Think about it. He's a mental health dude. Richard Allen might even have some drug abuse that we don't know about, right? We see them acting weird at the bar, yet they're saying, hey, we're not drinking, right? We haven't had a drink all night. Then you got Rick flopping around like a fish, looking skinny as shit. Like, we don't know anything about these people. Everybody's like, well, Rick was this, or he was such a good family man and a father. We don't know if he was addicted to meth. We don't know if he was addicted to child pornography. We don't know any of that. Why would you assume that? Either way. But yeah, when it comes to JP, you have this connection to mental health. We know that he was hospitalized. I think it would be a good thing for some of you web sleuths to see if maybe they were hospitalized together. Maybe they were hospitalized together. They were both in the National Guard or the Army Reserve. Or was it the Army National Reserve or Army National Guard? So they could be connected in multiple ways. That could be the connection. JP could be the connection between Richard Allen and the Kleins. That could be the glue that holds them together. Because we know that JP was cheating on his wife around that same time. He admitted to it. So he was cheating. Maybe Richard Allen was wingmanning or something. What's up, badass? I'm just glad the detectives didn't mention the bullet they found. Yeah, best thing they ever could have done. I almost believe he was going to essay them there and perhaps drug them and take them someplace else. Well, let me ask you this. How do we know, and this is just something I'm thinking out loud, how do we know Teresa Liebert testified that she's 100% sure that Brad Weber has a back road out that wouldn't be captured on security camera near the private drive or on any of his neighbors. Somehow he could get out of his own property through a back road. And if you go to Google Maps, you can see it. It basically kind of goes around his farm and then near the railroad tracks. Clear as day. So let's say he drove in there with the trailer, right? Let's say he already parked there. Participated in the murders, took the girls out in the trailer that he had, leaves through the back drive, leaves the trailer off site, or just leaves them in the trailer there on site, pulls out, gets some kind of supplies or something, and then comes back in so he can be seen driving through the private drive. You know, something weird with the trailer and all of that stuff. I hope that they served a search warrant on that trailer. Because he could have easily have taken those girls in the middle of the night, crossing the creek, and been working with Richard Allen. And if JP and Richard Allen are connected, that makes the likelihood of a Weber connection even more likely. Because Weber was working at Subaru, and so was JP. And the entire group that happened to be on the bridge. Those the friends that Cheyenne bumped into, they all worked at Subaru. They worked at Subaru. Brad Weber worked at Subaru. JP worked at Subaru. All just happened to be there. But it is a huge company, and it does employ a lot of people out there. But I do find it very strange that the majority of the people that were there all worked at the Subaru plant, right? You almost think that the killer, when you do the criminology, the killer could have possibly known that the owner of the private drive residence wouldn't be home at a certain time, and that you can kind of walk around freely there knowing that the homeowners are out of state. They were in Arizona, and the person watching the home would have been at work until about 2 p.m. Wouldn't be home till about 2:30 or so. So if you're planning to commit a murder, you could definitely plan it between 2 and 2:30, and that's when the girls were killed. Badass says, I'd like to think he had help. I see Alan as a loner, but only came out of his shell when boozed up around his wife. Yeah, liquid courage. Dark side. He definitely seems a little sus at times, but seems like his house right there would have been perfect if they're working together to know them. I mean, it makes more sense to me than Ron Logan, as far as place where the placement of the girls were. Right? If I killed the girls on my property, I'm gonna put them on the other side, away from my property, across the creek. Maybe they'll pin it on Ron Logan. If you're trying to think like Brad Weber. And he fishes down there. He camps down there near the crime scene. There was a little bridge down there that appears to be destroyed. There's a Jesus statue and a Mary statue pointing towards the crime scene. Kim Riley made a comment that you could see the crime scene from the patio of the Weber home. So if you are trying to document it, that would be a good place to place a camera. Right? You put your camera up there and you can film everything. Especially if you have a good lens on it. Yeah, Stephanie, what if the plan was Richard Allen to bring them to the Webers? Could have. I mean, think about it. Libby says that we can't go that way, so we have to go down here. So I don't know if she was talking about the geocache or going down to the water, because there is like a little campsite underneath the bridge on that side that if you stay on the easement, you can go down there and camp without the Webers complaining. As long as you stay next to the bridge when you walk down and like 4 to 6 feet from the water's edge. So there's like a fire pit down there, a picnic table, like some kind of makeshift, looks like a fish gutting table. Robin says the amount of blood in the murder scene indicates that was the spot. Yep, absolutely, Robin. So the scenario that I kind of laid out earlier in the live stream, that was based on the information provided during the trial by the specialists. That narrative, you can tie everything into it. Somebody trying to access the phone, why the girls were in the position that they were, why the phone and the shoe was underneath Abby, why was she wearing Libby's clothes? Like all of that's worked into that theory. And it's really not a theory. It's just explaining the official narrative, really. Thank you, Miss Doglover. Did Brad Weber live in Mexico City like Richard Allen did? When Jen Sofer ended up missing, or in Illinois, where Allen worked, which wasn't far from Iowa. Yeah, I always keep that in mind, Badass. A lot of people attack me for that, but think about it. Richard Allen, he left his job right around the time of the Evansdale case of Lyric and Elizabeth. He left his job in Walmart. He quit. He was like, I don't want to be out there anymore. And then when the Delphi murders happened, he had transferred from Peru just like I think like 2 weeks prior to the murders. And it makes me suspicious that like pre-planning, because he worked like 2 blocks away from the Klein home. Julian Powell knew the Kleins. It's just crazy. So if they were planning a murder together, it would make sense for Richard Allen to leave and transfer back, right? I don't want any connection to Peru and to these guys over here. Joseph says, pathetic. Case is long over. You're pathetic, sleuth. How pathetic. It'll be okay, Joseph. You'll be fine. That'll show me. Seems more than a coincidence. Alan seems to live or work not far from where the cousins in Iowa were murdered. 4-hour drive. But remember, when we did the criminology in the Evansdale case, we're looking for somebody familiar with fishing, camping, and hunting. The girls were found in a very exclusive hunting and camping location that only the killer would know, right? He would have to know that, be comfortable. So the girls went missing from a very popular fishing location as well. Another lake, another outdoors area where you can actually bring in your own small boat. And even from that location across the main highway is another very popular fishing area. So if you're coming and going, maybe you're not local to Evansdale, but we're looking for a fisherman, right? Richard Allen is a fisherman. So for whatever reason, he might have a motive for going out that way. You know, maybe he wants to take a vacation. Maybe he wants to go commit a murder. So even though it's not likely that it's connected, to just completely be blind to it, I think is I don't subscribe to that. I'm not going to fault you for it, but that's just not the way I see it. You know, I let the evidence dictate where we go or where I go. We'll follow the evidence. We're going to ground all of our speculation with facts. About as Alan living in Mexico City, then moving right after. Sofer ended up missing. There's another interesting little factoid. There was a cousin of Kagan Klein. They shared Christmas together. They had the same grandparents. And his cousin had a small daughter named Emily Ann. Kagan Klein picked the name Emily Ann to catfish girls. Well, this cousin, who had a daughter named Emily Ann, lived in Mexico at the same time as Richard Allen. They lived about 2 blocks from each other. So there's another strange connection. And this could all just be small town America. You know, I get that. But I mean, it's interesting. It's a good starting point for anybody out there that might want to do some digging. Like, hey, you know, maybe there is a connection. So you had Kagan Klein's close cousin lived in Mexico at the same time that Richard Allen did, not too far from him. So, I mean, the likelihood of them kind of running into each other, I think is pretty high. So that could be the connection as well. Darkside says, with Evansdale, the cause of death is kind of unknown, I guess. I think one of the parents might know. I think it was divulged, but I'm not sure. As far as the public is concerned, no. Whether there was SA has been withheld, and the cause of death, I believe, has been withheld. But we know that they have DNA. They're currently retesting the DNA. I don't know how long that usually takes. It was my understanding it was 4 to 6 weeks. I could be wrong, but we should be right at coming along at that point now from when they first initiated the new testing. So I look forward to those results. You know, never know. DNA might come back and be a match for Klunder, and then they can close that case. Or it could come back to somebody in CODIS Stephanie, if Alan is responsible for Evansdale, he probably used the gun to get them off their bicycles. Yeah, they also had a phone that wasn't, hooked up or anything. So I don't know if that could play a part. It was more of a toy. That's how it was explained to me. Eventually, something will come of the DNA someday. And yeah, I think technology will catch up because we do have male DNA in the Delphi case. But the thing is, you usually have random DNA because think about it. If you're Abby and you live with males, right? There's going to be times where you're going to have their DNA on you. All right, we're all caught up on the chat. Let's take a look at this. So this is what the long comment that he sent to me. Just for whatever reason, if we weren't able to get him on the show, I'm still trying to get him on, but he's a very busy guy. And apparently he keeps getting locked out of his Facebook too. So I'll just read these comments for now, and hopefully it'll be continued. He says, I am talking to Brandon. And if you guys don't know who Brandon Woodhouse is, Brandon is a guy that was being questioned by Richard Allen's defense team, in regards to the credibility of Carroll County. Brandon, who is Justin's brother, sued Carroll County successfully. So they hate this guy. They hate him. They hate Justin. They have a long history with Carroll County law enforcement. So during before Richard Allen's trial, Rosie accidentally sent Brandon Woodhouse the entire discovery from Richard Allen's case. Well, Brandon then went onto his YouTube channel and began posting some of it and divulging information, including information about Kagan Klein. He was talking to a young woman about how this woman saw Kagan Klein at a hotel and said, "I thought you were locked up." And he said, "Well, I'm allowed out for a day." He was allowed out with a couple bottles of champagne with a girl, and apparently he was allowed to go out and have a conjugal visit or a vacation day of some sorts. And then shortly after that, we have the Wabash River search and the arrest of Richard Allen, and no discussion of Kagan Klein during the trial. Well, Brandon Woodhouse made all of this public. And then I think they even they kicked in his door, the SWAT team. They served a search warrant on him. They got all that information back. This was all right around the same time of the crime scene photo leak. So it was this huge controversy. Brandon was all over the internet, and he was the first person to kind of leak that. So you had that leak that was caused by Rosie through Brandon Woodhouse. And then you had the actual leak from Mitch, who stole the information from the war room, Baldwin's war room. So Baldwin apparently later on subpoenaed Brandon, Justin's brother, while he was locked up in jail. So he's locked up right now. I can't remember what the charges are. Justin will tell us here in these comments. Well, while he's locked up, and I think he currently is still locked up, Baldwin paid him a visit. And according to Justin, Baldwin tried to get him to lie to help Richard Allen get off of the murders, which is shocking. So it's breaking news right here. My source, Justin Woodhouse, who was not afraid of these people. And as soon as we can, we're going to go ahead and get him on the show. May take many, many, many years, but eventually there will be answers. We are starting to understand more about Madeleine McCann. For example, 18 years later, although it sadly can't be proven at this point. Yeah, they need one more piece of information to settle that case. Hopefully it's not at the cost of another victim, though. Honestly, just my opinion, lawyers should be right there with Allen, in my opinion. Okay, let's read what Justin had to say. So now that you guys have the context and you got the background on who Brandon is, This is me communicating with his brother, Justin. And he sent me the longest. This is basically the gist of everything. He says, I'm talking to Brandon at 4 p.m. I'm going to talk to him about it, and then I will get back to you. It's an in-depth topic of conversation. The story is pretty crazy. Part of the story is about the corruption in Carroll County, and we'll cover how they took our guns from us, how they drugged him while he was in jail, and tried to set him up with heroin, meth, and needles while he was in jail. Then I would talk about what happened in his lawsuit, which is a totally different incident, when they tried to set him up. I would also be talking about an incident where him and I got into a nasty fist fight. He chased me out of the house with a butcher knife, and around the front yard, the police were called, and he went to jail. I would talk about after my divorce, I had moved to Tennessee and lived there for about a year, and how the prosecutor made me come back from Tennessee because he, McClelland, wanted me to do a deposition. Let me put on my glasses, you guys. The screen is killing my eyes. Oh. McClelland wanted me to do a deposition in my brother's case because I was considered the victim. How I gave my deposition and because of what I said. He was on his way to trial, and his lawyer called Brandon and told him that all of his charges had been dismissed. I would be telling some backstories about our childhoods, about his and I's relationship. We would talk about the YouTube videos he had made, and even how Richard Allen case tied into Brandon's case, where the attorney Andrew Baldwin accidentally emailed a certified copy of all the evidence they had against Richard Allen. Hold on. My wife is messaging me. Just 1 second, you guys. Just want to make sure she's all good. Okay, let me continue on here. Okay. It says I will we'll be talking about where the attorney Andrew Baldwin accidentally emailed a certified copy of all the evidence they had against Richard Allen on accident, and how Baldwin snuck into the jail to secretly see Brandon under a false name, and how Brandon's girlfriend met Baldwin in a Dollar General parking lot where Brandon's girlfriend met with Baldwin so he could erase the evidence off of Brandon's laptop. It was a shady deal involving code words and how shady all these people really are. Then I would be talking about the case that Brandon and I caught and the reason he's in prison until 2030. It involves a SWAT team showing up to our house, drones, snipers, and tactical units. Me and Brandon's relationship is good now, but for a good long while, things weren't good between us, and how our downward relationship was over a girl that he had been seeing for a couple of weeks. At the same time, he was in a relationship and living with one of my exes. But anyways, Brandon brought this girl around me while I was living with my daughter after I got out of prison in 2019. Her name was Stephanie, and I would be talking about Brandon's mental health and about his addiction at the time. I would be talking about the same thing about myself. But anyways, how Brandon used to be a bad cutter and how he had sent a video of himself cutting his arms with the razor blade in the shower, blood everywhere, and telling her in the video that he loved her. She stopped seeing him after that, and 7 days later, how her and I got married. Brandon for the longest time said I stole his dream girl. Thing is, she was a narcissist, and it was by far the most toxic, fucked up relationship I have ever been in. I would talk about part of our childhood where our parents got divorced. Our mother was a beautiful cocktail waitress at a high-end bar, restaurant, and motel called Our Time in Lafayette, where she met this 33rd degree Freemason that bought my mom a house, care, everything in the house. We even had a $20,000 grandfather clock in our house that he bought our mother. How every Tuesday morning at the crack of dawn, he would pull up to our mailbox and put something in the mailbox. How I eventually caught on and one day checked the mailbox after he left, and there was a newspaper folded, and half on the inside of the paper there was an envelope taped to the inside, and when I pulled it out, there was thousands of dollars in the envelope. Okay, we're good. How there was thousands of dollars in the envelope, and how I began stealing some of this money every week. Our mother used to drop off at this old man's house. Brandon says he molested him at some point. I believe him because this man would do weird shit like just whip his dick out in front of us and start pissing in the front yard. So in the year 2000, Brandon, myself, and two other dudes went one night at 3 a.m. in the morning, and we drove over 2 hours away, parked our car in one of the guy's fields next to a patch of trees by his house. How we kicked in his door, and how Brandon was so fucking angry with this dude that at one point Brandon stuck the barrel of a shotgun in his mouth and was going to blow his brains out. All I remember is seeing my life flash before my eyes. I can still remember actually pulling the barrel of the shotgun out of the dude's mouth and feeling of the steel barrel scraping against his teeth. Brandon pistol whipped him, and we put feet and hands on him after he went down. I tied him up with telephone wire cord of an alarm clock. We robbed a 33rd degree Freemason for 30 some odd guns and a bunch of antique jewelry. When we left, we yanked his phone cords out of the wall, and then I proceeded to flatten all of his tires. When we were on our way home, all I could think about is the fact I honestly didn't know if we killed this man or not. Long story short, the two other guys that were with us snitched us out to the police. The one dude told them that Brandon and I had killed a black drug dealer and that we had fed his chopped up body to hogs on our farm. And then we questioned about a prosecutor's dad that was kidnapped. There's more to that part of the story, but that's the part where we went to prison for the first time. When we got arrested, we had multiple A and B felonies. And when we were caught, they gave us a $1 million bond. We both ended up with 17-year prison sentence. I would talk a little bit about a case I caught in 2010 for manufacturing methamphetamine. All right, let's take a break there. I told you guys this stuff is juicy. This is if Hannah Shakespeare's watching, you need to get with this guy Justin here. This is some juicy stuff, Hannah. Somebody tag Hannah Shakespeare in the comment section. Do it. There's a lot going on here. Dark side, leaking crime photos and all that mess. Baldwin knows Alan is guilty. I agree. I think so. I still think the Podesta brothers kidnapped. Yeah, I mean, they look like the sketches. Stephanie, oh my God. Essay. What up, Essay? Lean like a cholo. Elbows up, side to side. Just kidding. Did you see that Ryan Ruth stabbed himself in the neck with a pen in court after the guilty verdict? Holy shit. This was the guy that shot at Trump at the golf course. Wow, when did that happen? Don't forget, guys, we're going live a little bit later today. We're going to have a Sleuth Crew check-in. That's kind of where I talk about what we have in store, the future of the channel, whatever we have planned for you guys coming up. We can talk about that stuff there, too. Looks like he is fine from what I saw. So dramatic. Yeah, these guys are nuts. All right, so about a case I caught in 2010 for manufacturing methamphetamine. How I was living in an actual sting operation. There was an ad in the wall. There was an ad in the paper talking about a move-in special. No deposit, no first month's rent, move-in special. How me and my ex-wife moved into this apartment on February 1st, and how on March 1st, I went to check my mail, and I was jumped on by two plainclothes detectives, where they beat the fuck out of me. I would talk about how the apartment was set up to where these detectives were in my walls and in my ceilings watching me cooking meth, and how I caught one of the detectives behind my kitchen cabinets. One night, when I was hiding my meth lab, and how another time I was sitting in a chair getting head from my ex-wife, and when I looked up into the vent fan, one of them was watching me. The apartment across the hall from me was empty, and they had two ways they were able to get into my apartment. They had a ladder that went up and over the hallway ceiling where they would be in my ceiling. I could hear their phones vibrating at night. Two different times when I caught them in my ceilings and walls, I maced them inside the walls and up in the ceilings. No doubt that's why they beat the fuck out of me. But anyways, me and my ex-wife was arrested. Brandon came and bonded me out of jail for 20,000. My ex made a deal with the prosecutor to testify against me in my trial where I didn't even show up to. When my trial had started, I was shaking a bottle of meth, cooking dope, talking about not guilty, Your Honor. They held my trial in absentia, and the jury convicted me for manufacturing methamphetamine. I was finally caught, but 3 different times I had run-ins with the police, where I used Brandon's date of birth and social security number and actually got away. One time, I was leaving the bar at 3 a.m. and someone had called the cops and told them I was in the bar. I mean, it was all over the front page of the newspaper that they had convicted me in my trial and that I was absconding from law enforcement. Anyways, they had me in handcuffs, and somehow I was able to talk myself out of the cuffs. I would talk about Brandon's fentanyl addiction and how 5 times in 9 months, how I had overdosed. The last time I overdosed, it took Brandon 5 Narcans and 5 minutes of mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to bring me back to life. They thought I was dead, so they had called 911. I was pissed when I came back to life when I heard them talking to 911 because I had a warrant out of Carroll County at the time. The ambulance showed up in our driveway. I went out to talk to them, wanted to do a bunch of tests on me. I lied and said I was drunk and had fell and hit my head. I refused treatment. Brandon came outside and began talking to EMS. I know the police were on their way. I hurried up in the back door where I went to my room to take some Xanax bars. All of a sudden, I heard loud banging and screaming and hollering coming from our back room where the washer and dryer is. I ran into the laundry room where there was like 5 cops trying to take down and arrest Brandon because they pulled up in our driveway. Brandon was on his way around the back of the house. They thought he was me, and he actually got the back door shut. And they kicked in the door and literally jumped on him. When I finally made it into the back room, me and Brandon were fighting the police, and all you could see was flashlights flying everywhere in the dark. I was taken to jail that night. The next night, Brandon bonded me out of jail. But when he came to jail to bond me out, he had a mental breakdown on the whole police department. He was screaming, yelling, and being violent. I still can't believe they didn't arrest him. He was expressing his qualms about everything that had happened to him in Carroll County, our farmhouse in Carroll County. The police used to in our basement and outside around our house at night as we were under an investigation that went on for a very long time. There was one night I was on meth. Been up a couple days at this point. It had to be about 4 a.m. I had all the lights off. The house, I was quietly crouched down in our dining room area watching through the bay windows that looked out our backyard. There was a light-colored sheet hung over the bay window. A bay window like has a crank, and you roll up the windows. Anyways, the moon was shining through the window, so I was able to see silhouettes through the sheet that was hung up. I had been sitting there for maybe an hour watching and waiting. All of a sudden, I saw a silhouette of a grown-ass man approaching the window. I almost shit my pants. Our Wi-Fi box router was on the floor just underneath the bay window. I shit you not, this motherfucking cop started pulling the window open and stuck his arm inside our house. He was reaching for the Wi-Fi router. That's why I grabbed our AR-15 assault rifle all at one time in one moment. I flipped the light on and yanked the sheet down and had the assault rifle right in the cop's face. He was probably the one shitting his pants at that point. But I went on a sovereign citizen rant at the top of my lungs, screaming that the police had no authority being in and on our property. I threatened to shoot them. And when I made it down our hallway into the living room, the lights were off, the whole house. But when I entered the living room, I had probably 6 or 7 infrared dots all over my chest. The fucked up part is that after that happened, after the infrared dots on my chest, they just packed up and left. I couldn't believe they didn't arrest me. but that goes to show you that they were there illegally. I have other stories to talking about the security system we had around the house and some of the shit that we had on surveillance video. Sorry I went on so long. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit about what I would be talking about. Plus the backstories that eventually tie into the corruption. I think that's pretty much it. All right. So we'll leave that there. So very interesting, especially the part where he talks about Baldwin visiting his brother Brandon in jail using a fake name and trying to get him to lie under oath. Like, what do you make of that shit? And Carroll County law enforcement just reaching in, probably trying to illegally bug his Wi-Fi or get his password so they can hack into it. You know, that just shows how corrupt they are. I saw a man in Evansville kidnapped 2 girls from Missouri, captured. Good. Good job. What's up, Robert? Seems pretty risky. All right, guys, I think that's going to do it. If you're part of the replay crew, you know exactly what to do. Drop a comment. We'll get back to you. If you guys could please consider subscribing, donating to the Cash App. And if you can't do any of that, just hit the like button. Even consider becoming a member if you could. Special thank you to my members. Special thanks to my subscribers. All of you who continue to support the Sleuth Intuition channel. The future's looking bright, and we're only getting started. So I'll see you guys soon. Take care.